Well, it's happening now very specifically because tomorrow in Den Haag, the Dutch government will be formally introducing an EU Magnitsky Act. And as many people know, Vladimir Putin has made repealing the Magnitsky Act his single largest foreign policy priority because it potentially sanctions his cronies and freezes their assets. He was upset when the US passed the Magnitsky Act. He was upset when Canada did, upset when Britain did, and he's very upset that the European Union is about to do it. And that's the significance of this timing.
So you think it's not about the prosecutor's office, it's about your personal relation with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I don't have a personal relationship with Vladimir Putin.
His personal relation.
He's obviously very obsessed with me. He's very emotional about me. He's very humiliated by the actions that I've taken around the world. And we saw that at the press conference with President Trump in Helsinki. We saw that last year after the Canadians passed the Magnitsky Act. You can see the body language, and he's a very angry, angry little man.
How important these charges are for you, and are you planning to somehow deal with them?
Well, the charges are quite helpful to me because what they do is they're so absurd that in any Western capital, political or law enforcement, they're laughing at them. But what it has done is it's elevated the issue of Magnitsky sanctions, of Magnitsky investigations to a high level, and that does help us actually in terms of our objectives. And my two main objectives are getting more Magnitsky Acts passed and getting more countries to open criminal investigations into the theft of the $230 million that Serghei Magnițchi was killed over. And all of these absurd statements from the Russian government only help in that objective.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, it's the first time when Russian authorities named what happened to Magnițchi a murder, and they say that it was a poisoning. Why do you think it happened so?
Well, I mean, again, they're living in a fantasy world where truth has no bearing, and so, as you pointed out, for 9 years they claimed that Serghei Magnițchi had not been killed, that he died of natural causes, there was no violence or any other type of foul play. Now they say he was murdered. That's very significant, and it's very significant from our standpoint because there's a mountain of evidence of who actually murdered him. We know for sure that in the last hour of his life, he was beaten by 8 riot guards with rubber batons. There's documents proving that. We know that in the last days of his life, he was suffering very, very serious illness in which various Russian judges and law enforcement agency officials purposely denied him medical care. And we also know about all sorts of torture and other mistreatment in prison. And so there is an absolutely rock-solid case for murder of Serghei Magnițchi. And now that they have changed their position after 9 years, we should go after the real murderers.
And the very last question, to the best of my knowledge, yesterday you tweeted a picture of the Interpol General Assembly speaking about it's going to be Vladimir Putin's best achievement if the leader of the Interpol will be the Russian man. How do you think it might, I don't know, influence the charges or your case?
Well, first of all, we don't know if Russia is going to succeed in getting their man as president. But what I can say is that Interpol is at greater risk than I am from this incident. And what I mean by that is that this individual who's supposed to become president, he's been responsible for all sorts of effectively criminal actions by the Russian government to abuse Interpol for political purposes. And if he's allowed to become president, then that completely destroys the legitimacy and credibility of Interpol. And Interpol has a lot more to lose than I do. I don't travel to unsafe countries. But if Interpol is run by effectively a person who is doing criminal activities, then the largest crime-fighting organization in the world has been taken over by the criminals. And that's an absolute disaster for law enforcement in the future.